My family gave me a gift for my birthday recently, and that gift was an experience called, I think this was Mission Breakout. There's a couple of these in Indianapolis. This is an escape room experience. This is where you are locked in a room and you have clues and you got to get out. That sounds fun, doesn't it? Get locked in a room, just like when I was a little kid, Mom locked me in the closet for days. That was a blast. Now that explains a lot, doesn't it? So we take this experience. Now, if you've never done this before, there are different adventures. They're all themed. Our theme was Island Escape. That was where, here, let me give you the premise. You're in a vacation, tropical vacation, that pretty much consists of a room. It's a locked room. And in this island vacation, there's a big old volcano that's just supposed to be there for scenic beauty, right? Except you wake up and you realize the volcano is about to erupt, and it's going to erupt in 1 hour, and you've got to somehow figure out a way to get inside the boat so you can start the engine so you can get off the island. There's the premise. So we worked together for an hour as a team. We all got busy, and we were doing codes, and we were unlocking things, and we were, hey, what about this? And so it was our family, a couple other friends that joined us, and we were having a blast. We were having a blast. And you probably know where I'm going with this, right? At least you think you do. Because we believe that we should do life with Jesus in community on mission. Well, this has got to be about community, right? Together, the Johnson family plus a couple of friends, we're working together as one. We are on this thing as a team. Whether we get out or not is dependent upon whether we can function together. So you're thinking, this is all about community. And if that's what you are thinking, you are wrong. Because we didn't work so well as a team part of the time. In fact, part of the time, there was this long lull of, well, we just can't figure this out. What about, no, that's not going to work kind of thing. You've been there, right? Well, we didn't figure it all out. In fact, we got into the boat, but we weren't able to start the engine. The volcano erupted, and we all died. We died. All right, so my family afterwards, they're like, Dad, please don't post that on Facebook. Because I've seen other people, and, they get out, and they like, we escaped, right? They're like, we don't want to be that family. Like, okay, I won't post it. But I'll tell the church. I got their permission. Everything's cool. I said, it's for a good cause. It's a good cause. I'll tell them it was all my fault. Okay, I'll tell them that. You guys know better, but I'll tell them that. This is not about community as a community. We died. It's about mission. We're all on mission. We have a mission to accomplish. We have something to do. I mean, Mark put it so well. We're building lives on Christ. That's our mission, right? We've got a mission. We've got to do it. And yet, I wonder sometimes if maybe we're on the wrong mission as a society. I don't know if you've noticed this or not, but I think the focus of the society is a little off the mission of God. Would you agree with that? A little off? So I'm standing there. This is before I even get into the room to have our adventure, where we die, Ryan. We died, didn't we? Yeah. Before we even get into the island escape room, there's several different themes, different rooms. Our room is all ready, but they're asking us to sign waivers. Let's sign waivers. And I'm thinking, well, when we go rock wall climbing, we sign waivers. I get that, because we really could die, I guess. Trampoline things, those places, you got to sign waivers for those. They're dangerous, right? Paintball, sign waivers. Paintballs hurt. I asked the young man behind the counter, though, are we going to actually be, climbing anything? Nope. Are we going to be trapped under anything? Nope. Are we going to be in danger in any way? Nope. I said, why are we signing waivers? What exactly do we do in here? He said, well, you just have to really use your mind. And I'm thinking, how many people have been sent to the hospital for using their mind? Is it like this mind sprain you get? I know people that have been sent to the hospital for not using their mind. So, aren't we like an over-lawyered society? Aren't we like everything is you have to sign waivers for everything? Do you remember as a child? Some of you will remember this. You actually got to do things, crazy things. I know it's dangerous. Nobody would ever let you do that. But you did things like go with your buddies to the park without adult supervision. Do you remember that? Oh, that was awesome. And I grew up in Southern California. Lots more people. And we just went to the park. We just wandered off. In fact, we chose which one because there's different parks. And some of them were pretty far away. I walked to school by myself sometimes. Not by choice. I walked with my sisters, and sometimes I would, I had to stay after, probably because I was bad. And then I walked by myself home, and no big deal. Mom was not even all that, were you safe? She's like, where's your homework? How come you didn't bring your homework home? How many remember just drinking from the hose? You'd probably die if you did that today. Drinking right from, you're like Ryan shaking her head. No, Dad, that's gross. No, that metallic taste was good. We liked it. How many remember getting to eat all your Halloween candy, all of it? Mom didn't go, oh, that's suspicious. No, she's like, have at it. In fact, eat it all tonight. Who cares, right? We did things that are crazy. You remember this? Some of you do. You got to share with me if you remember this. Do you remember, first of all, I need to explain this. Seat belts were optional at one point. In fact, I'm not even sure all cars had them. I mean, they would get like buried. You remember that? They'd get buried in the seats and you couldn't even find them. Who needed seat? They just got in the way of laying down. You remember this? Okay, you got to share this if you remember this, because sometimes you have more than one person in the family. You need more space than a car will provide. So you would actually lay down, not on the seat because your sister's on the seat because she's bigger and tougher, and you'd lay on the floor. Remember that? Yeah, do you remember laying on the hump? Yeah, but because it was all rear-wheel drive back then. There was this big hump in the middle. You didn't care. It was kind of warm. Kind of cool. So we are all sign waivers and get permission and make sure you're healthy and make sure, and all of that is great. I'm not against it. I think you should take your Flintstone vitamins. Prepare yourself for whatever. This is good stuff. This is. But I just wonder if we have, by trying to keep everybody safe and everybody protected and everybody in a bubble, whether we've got this false sense that we really can be safe, that we really can protect ourselves against even things that are greater than what this world could throw at us. It's just what I was playing with, what I was thinking as he's having me sign a waiver because I'm going to use my brain and I might hurt myself. So we're in this series called A Generous Life, Jesus' Generous Life, and we come to a place where there are 4 individuals who are going to do an amazing, amazing thing. They're going to take their friend who is paralyzed on a mat and bring him to Jesus in hopes that Jesus will heal him. And as we go through this, I just want you to think of all the OSHA violations these men committed. All of the safety violations. They didn't seatbelt him up. They didn't put a helmet on him. They didn't have anybody sign a waiver. It was just, let's go for a walk, and this is going to change your life. We may kill you in the process, but it's going to change your life. So let me give you the background. Let me set it up. He says, this is what it says in Luke. One day as Jesus was teaching Pharisees, those are religious teachers, and teachers of the law, more religious teachers, who had come from every village of Galilee. Galilee is the northern region, and from Judea. Judea is the southern region, and Jerusalem, the capital of the southern region. These are religious leaders from all over have come to Capernaum to come to this house. And they're all sitting there. Now, I have to pause here because I think this is like the punchline to a joke. Only we're not told the setup until later. A few verses later, we're told, hey, this house is packed. There's not room for anybody else to even come into the house. And so these religious leaders that come from all over must have gotten there first, must have even waited in line. They're like groupies to the best band out there, waiting for 3 days to get in to get the best seats. And as soon as the doors open, they're running, passing everybody to get to the front row so they can sit down in their nice, beautiful robes and be in the front seat, or the front seats, front row. These guys have really had to work hard to be in the couches of the home that is packed where you can't even get inside anymore. And what's odd about this is these groupies that have waited and as the conference doors opened, flooded in and ran to the front seats. They don't even like Jesus. They hate him. They're actually looking for a way to trip him up. In fact, they're sitting there just waiting for Jesus to attempt a miracle so they can have an up-close view to see if maybe he's doing some kind of sleight of hand trick. And they go, oh, I see that. So here it is, religious leaders sitting down comfortable in the best seats, trying to see if Jesus, sneering at him, watching him, to see if he'd mess up. Jesus is unfazed by this, and the power of the Lord was present for him to heal the sick, meaning he's there to do ministry regardless of the critics in the front row looking for him to mess up. Some men came carrying a paralytic on a mat, which always amazes me. Every time I read this story, the love of these men is amazing. We don't know how far they had to walk, but it is not easy to do this. Carrying their friend on a mat across town and tried to take him into the house to lay him there before Jesus, which amazes me because in front of Jesus in the best seats are the religious leaders. I like to think of them as four of them. I know they came from all over, but I like to contrast the four that are sitting here with the four that are outside, exhausted, trying to get their buddy in. And so we have a couple of developments here. We have some men that are carrying a man that cannot even get into the house, and they have to figure out a way to get this man to Jesus while the religious leaders are sitting inside all comfy, looking for a way for Jesus to mess up. And so when they couldn't find a way to get in because of the crowd, they went up on the roof, which seems really odd, but it actually is common back then for there to be stairwells. Now, they weren't very thick. They were on the outside. They were service access stairs, really, so that they could take their crops up onto the roof and lay them out to dry. So in your mind's eye, can you see four men carrying a man on a mat upstairs? This probably was the most dangerous part, although the next thing they're going to do seems pretty dangerous too. They're trying to get this man up onto the roof so they can lower him down into the middle of where Jesus is at because they can't get to Jesus. So what you have here, the two developments are religious leaders who have come a great distance, waiting in line, flooding the doors, getting to the best seats so that they could do whatever they could do to discredit Jesus. Men on the outside carrying their friend, trying to get him up onto the roof, digging through the roof to get him down into where everybody is at. And so it says they lowered him on his mat through the tiles into the middle of the crowd, right in front of Jesus. So what you have are friends that are willing to do. So you have religious leaders and you have friends that are both willing to do whatever it takes. Whatever it takes. Whatever it takes to discredit Jesus, whatever it takes to get their friend down in front of Jesus. And the strangest thing happens. Everybody is expecting a miracle, or at least an attempt at a miracle. Those that are trying to trip Jesus up, I mean, they're waiting to see Jesus so they can say, we saw how you did that. Everybody's expecting a miracle from Jesus, or at least an attempt of a miracle. And the most interesting development in the story is when Jesus looks down at the man, after he looks up at the men that have lowered him and commend them for their faith, he looks down at the man and speaks to him these words. When Jesus saw their faith, that's the men up there, he looked down and he said, "Friend, your sins are forgiven." Wait, what? Who was talking about sins? Why are we talking? Wait, what? I thought we were talking about healing here. I thought we were talking about miracles here. I thought, and the men up there, they're just like, I'm sure they're still panting. And they're looking down at their friend on the ground, looking at Jesus, thinking, what did we just do? Wait a second, that's not the deal. That's not what we promised him. And I imagine the guy on the mat, he's probably looking up, first of all, at the religious leaders who are all scowling at him, right? Looking up at Jesus, who's probably smiling. Man, I just gave you forgiveness of sins. Isn't that awesome? And the man's just looking up, and then he looks up at his friends. He says, that's not what you promised me. This is rather embarrassing, actually. Everybody is kind of looking at me like, what sin did he do? It's just an awkward moment for him. So you got the men up top who are disappointed. You got the man on the floor who's embarrassed. You got the religious leaders who in their hearts begin to grumble like, what in the world, Jesus? In fact, we're told their thoughts. The Pharisees and the teachers of the law began thinking to themselves, who is this fellow who speaks blasphemy? Who can forgive sins but God alone? That's a true statement. Who can forgive sins but God alone? That's so true. This is what they're thinking in their hearts. How dare he? Who does he? That's what blasphemy means, pretending to be God. How could you be God? You can't, what? This just throws them for a loop. And then Jesus looks at these religious men. So the guy's still laying on the ground. He's not been healed. The men up there are still dumbfounded. What? And the religious leaders are just sitting there just mad. And so Jesus knew what they were thinking and asked, why are you thinking these things in your hearts? Which must have blown them away. I mean, revelation right there. Jesus knows what you're thinking. Why are you thinking these things? And then he asked this question, and it's kind of like a puzzle. Which is easier to say, your sins are forgiven, that's what Jesus said, or to say, get up and walk? Now, here's what we typically do with this question. We give all kinds of our answers to it, and I don't know why we do this when Jesus doesn't even wait for an answer. I mean, think about that. Jesus is asking a question and not waiting for an answer, which should be a huge clue that it's not about the answer. It's more about the relationship between these two. In fact, if we were to answer this question, here's what we would have to say, knowing what we know. If we were to answer this question, which is easier, we would say, they're both hard. In fact, they're both impossible. You can't forgive sins unless you are God. You can't have the power to make somebody walk again unless you have the power of God. And here's what Jesus is doing. He's equating his power to heal with his authority to forgive. And it blows the religious leaders away because they were all there sitting there waiting for, discrediting his power to heal. And Jesus is playing with them saying, I'm not even going to heal him. I'm just going to up the ante and make you even more mad. I'm going to tell this man, no more condemnation for your sin. It's gone, which will just burn in their hearts. But honestly, it shouldn't burn any more than the power to heal because both of them are equal. Only God can do this. And so they're dumbfounded. They say nothing. Jesus can't just not answer them. So he goes on and says, but that you may know that the Son of Man, that's his favorite title for himself, has authority on earth to forgive sins. He said to the paralyzed man, I tell you, get up, take your mat, and go home. Immediately, he, the man that was paralyzed, stood up in front of them, took what he had been lying on, and went home, praising God. Everyone was amazed and gave praise, everyone but the religious leaders, and gave praise to God. They were filled with awe and said, we have seen remarkable things today. This has been just an amazing, amazing day. And so Jesus heals the man after all. Because of the men's faith, because of his faith, and to prove to the religious leaders, look, my authority to forgive sins is the same as my power to heal. And yet, if you think about what just happened, was it entirely necessary for Jesus to forgive the man's sins in order to prove his deity? Was it necessary? Let's play it out another way. Let's say that the men lower their friend down on a mat in front of Jesus. The religious leaders are there waiting. All right, we're going to see about this. We're going to see what you do with this man now. Woo, just try to heal him. And Jesus says to the man on the mat, hey friend, because of their faith, because of your faith, get up, take your mat, and go home. And the man gets up, and he takes up his mat, and he walks out, and everybody's like, other than the religious leaders, oh, that was amazing. That was so cool. Is there a difference? Did Jesus have to add the part about forgiveness of sins? The question then becomes, why did he? Why did he add that part? What does Jesus want us to see? What does he want the men up there to see? What does he want the man on the mat to see? What does he want the religious leaders to see? I just wonder if what Jesus is doing is he's taking forms like this, which is actually the mission breakout consent form, the one I signed. This is not the one I signed. Sorry. The one I signed was electronic. I printed this one. I'm wondering if what Jesus is doing is taking this form and all forms and saying, stop playing it so safe. You can't live your life completely in a bubble protected from everything this life throws at you. I mean, there's nothing wrong with you taking your vitamins and you working out and you trying to get fit and you trying to do the right thing and seeing the doctor often. And, you ought to go to the dentist a couple times a year so your teeth don't fall out. You ought to take care of yourself. There's nothing wrong with that. But I wonder if what Jesus is trying to get at, and the reason why he focused on the spiritual side of the man lying before him, is because so often you and I focus on the physical side of each other's health. Even when we pray, and even when we come to church to pray, it is about the physical need, isn't it? Aren't our prayers often about, oh, I got somebody who's sick and they need healing, and that's great, and Jesus has compassion and Jesus heals. There's nothing wrong with that. But maybe, what we do when we make it all about the healing for that individual is we forget that there's spiritual struggles and spiritual battles going on in that person's life that we ought to be talking about. And what Jesus is trying to do is get us to focus more on the spiritual side of things. He looks at, those men who had great faith. He commends them for faith. What they did was the right thing. But Jesus says, as much as you have passion for this man's healing, I have passion for this man's healing. Only I have passion for this man's healing in his soul. You want his body to be healed. I want his soul to be healed. And yes, I'm going to help you and I'm going to take care of his body, but that's not the big picture. You see, the picture you're looking at is so small. We're here for such a short time. But what I'm looking at is something that is much, much larger. In fact, something that my hands can't even express because it's eternal. What we concentrate on, what we focus on when our friend is hurting, when our friend is in need, is right here. And I know this is true because recently I hurt my shoulder, and many in this room have helped me with great advice. Some of it contradictory, but great advice. And I've taken a lot of it, and I've done a lot of it, and I thank you for it, but it's right here, it's right now. Don't we do this? I know this doctor who. I know this, you ought to do this therapy. You need physical therapy. I know these herbs that will. I know these essential oils that can. And all of it is great. And I haven't heard all of this just for my shoulder, but these are just examples. I know this specialist, and I know you ought to try this, and I read this on the internet, and it never lies, and you ought to do this, and we all play doctor, right? And we want to help, and we get passionate about it because we all have our passion. If our passion is working out, if our passion is nutrition, if our passion is our herbs, if our passion is essential oils, if our passion is the specialty drink, we got them, right? We know. We know it works for us. We're a living testimonial, and we get passionate about it, and we want to help, and we jump in, and we share, and then we find out that in addition to the health ailment, whatever that health ailment is, that we're just going after, we're carrying them upstairs, we're lowering them through the roof. Whatever that ailment is, we'll go the extra mile, we'll put passion in it, we'll do whatever it takes, and then we find out that they've got a sin issue, and we're silent. Because that's awkward. Who wants to talk about that? You mean you're living with somebody? You mean you believe that? Oh, well, that's cool. So how's your shoulder? Right? We want to focus on the physical because the spiritual makes us uncomfortable. Jesus focuses on the spiritual. And he says to the men who are willing to do whatever it takes, Whatever it takes. He says to those men, look, I'm willing to do whatever it takes for his soul. I commend you for your faith. Your faith is awesome. But I want you to know that there's something so much bigger that needs to be addressed and needs to be focused on. And that's the eternal state. You're focused on this. I want to be focused on this. I know. You're thinking this is everything because you feel for them, or they have pain, or there's hurt, or there's illness. I get that. But I'm focused on this because I promise you this is momentary in light. You're going to look back on it in eternity and you're going to go, oh, I see, that was nothing compared to this. And I know that trivializes this, and I don't mean to, but in comparison, eternity makes this life a blip, doesn't it? Our hearts need to focus on the things Jesus focuses on. The religious leaders want to trip up Jesus, and they want to catch Jesus, and they want to hurt Jesus, and Jesus just wants to say to them, you have no idea how far I'll go to save this man's soul. I will bleed for him. I will die for him. I will let you do whatever you want to this body of mine. You can torture me, but I'm saving his soul. That's the passion he wants us to have. That's where he wants our heart to be. We will carry our friends for miles to a good doctor. How far will we carry them to Jesus, who wants to heal their soul? Jesus once said, do not be afraid of those who can kill the body but cannot kill the soul. Rather, be afraid of the one who can destroy both soul and body in hell. Jesus' focus is always bigger than the here and now. He's focused on the eternal destiny of a man. That's what he cares about more than he cares about this. And I know he has compassion for your hurt and your pain and your need. He does. But he has more compassion for your eternity. And he wants you to look at your friend who has hurt and need and say, yes, have compassion, absolutely. Be generous with what you've been given to help that individual, but be generous beyond this life and be generous with the mercy of God that saves you for eternity. One time, Paul was talking to his friend Timothy, and he said these words. Timothy had some kind of physical ailment, and Paul was saying, hey, look, you need some physical training. You need to stay healthy. Maybe it's running on a treadmill. I don't know what a treadmill looked like back then, but, I can imagine Fred Flintstone treadmill stuff. You need some physical training in your life. It's of some value in this lifetime. So Paul then goes on, and he says to his friend Timothy, but godliness has value for all things, holding promise for this life and the one to come. And all I want you to think about is this. Are you willing to start a spiritual conversation with your friend, with your neighbor, with your coworker, with your family member? When you recognize an opening, an opportunity, I hope you're praying for people who you work with and you live with and your extended family and your friends. I hope you're praying for their health, but also for their spiritual condition. And when God gives you an opening, are you willing? This is an honest question. You got to be willing here and now, because maybe God's going to give that opportunity to somebody else, or maybe that individual's going to lose out on an opportunity because you're not praying. See, I believe there's a spiritual battle going on in which prayer is vital for God to work, because the enemy is closing down doors and opportunities and pulling people away. But if you pray for that individual and God gives you an opportunity, the question is, are you willing to have a spiritual conversation with them? And you need to answer that now. If God gives you the opportunity, will you talk about heaven, hell, Jesus, eternity, life, the Spirit of God living in you? Will you talk about something more than, you got to take that for your shoulder. That'll help your shoulder. By the way, I'd still appreciate prayers for my shoulder. Pain has a remarkable way of pulling you back to the here and now, doesn't it? But in our day-to-day pain, we need to realize that there's a greater pain that we can't even imagine for those who miss out on an opportunity to surrender their life to Jesus Christ and to live free of tears, free of pain, free of suffering. You see, there's a place called hell. Jesus talks about it often. Our job is to bring people to Jesus, not just because Jesus is a healer in this lifetime, but because he's a healer in the next, eternally. Are you willing to have that conversation with your friend? Only you can answer that. And don't be surprised if you answer that right here and right now if God doesn't give you an opportunity. But I just wonder if he's waiting to give you that opportunity until you have solved this in your heart. Will I talk about spiritual things? So I'm going to ask you to think about your answer to that question while maybe someone else in here needs to think about their eternal destiny. Because everything I talked about is so true. There is a heaven, there is a hell, there is a cross in which Jesus suffered in this lifetime for your eternity. And if you don't have a relationship with Jesus, I invite you to come forward, and I want to share with you how to have a relationship with Jesus that will change not only this lifetime, but the one to come. So I'm going to ask you to stand, and we're going to pray. And this is your opportunity to pray about your decision. Will I take advantage of the next opportunity I am given by God to talk about spiritual things with my coworker, with my friend? And if this is a time for you to make a decision, I invite you to come when we sing. Father God, we're praying for courage today. Courage in two ways. Courage to step out and to say, I need Jesus. And courage to choose to have that spiritual conversation the next time we have an opportunity. Help us to be passionate for the lost. We ask for courage in Jesus' name. Amen. If you have a decision, come.